Welcome to Forum 360 on Fusion, your PBS channel. This is Mark Welfley, your host today. Thank you for joining us for our global outlook with a local view. Can you think of 5 words that describe you? If you asked a friend, family member, or a colleague to describe you, what would they use as words for you? Sometimes who you are and how others perceive you can be very different. This difference in perception can be the difference between getting a job or not getting hired. So exactly how do people come to the perception of who you are? How can you really take control, own, and market your personal brand? Most importantly, how has the pandemic changed how we prepare and market ourselves for a job or for anything? My guest today is Justin Allen Hayes, a professor of business, entrepreneur, motivational speaker, and author of the book, The House of You, 5 Workforce Preparation Tips for a Successful Career, now in its 2nd edition at houseofyou.com. Justin is passionate about helping others navigate their own workforce preparation and mental health journey, and he joins us today. So welcome, Justin.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
You're welcome. So in your book, you discuss how to own and market your personal brand. What does branding yourself mean? Define it for us.
Branding to me is much like a corporation. Everything that encompasses you as a person, from when you wake up to when you go to bed. As a corporation has products, they have logos, mission statements, they have employees. So too, you as an individual are going to have work that you do, education, skills that you have earned along the way. And so everything from that social media post on Twitter to a blog that you write for an association really defines a person's personal brand.
And how does the perception of someone actually come to be? So when you look at someone, and what do you use to understand how you perceive them and how they perceive others? How do you read people?
Absolutely. Just like we're talking today, from people viewing us on camera and in person, people that will hear us on the radio, that have access to my book, that hear me speak, see how I'm dressed, what I do on my website, how I teach, what courses I teach, and everything about me from A to Z is really a perception that we have of others. And so as our viewers and listeners will have a perception of me from the first time we started the show, so too will their perception grow and possibly change if they look at my website and look at my book and look at some blog posts, check out my LinkedIn page, etc.
Is it easy to change a perception once it's established in someone else's mind?
It's tough, especially thinking from the corporation standpoint. If there is a product quality issue that occurs, then that corporation is going to have to put together a crisis intervention plan of, hey, this happened. We are sorry that this occurred. We are going to move forward and compensate those that may be affected and move forward and change our quality processes as we move forward. So too, as an individual for your brand, you could go through your education as an undergrad and do great. You could have great grade point average. And then when you go for your master's, you may not do as well as you did in undergrad. And so maybe the perception of teachers, maybe the perception of those that you may interview with or mentorship with, that may change. And so you want to have those tools in your tool belt really to be able to modify and move forward, accept what occurred and move forward, not to dwell on it.
Sure. So with people getting even less face time with each other during our pandemic here, is it harder to get the message out of who you are?
It is. So part it is and part isn't. So the part that is, there's more competition. Everybody has access to social media, to the Twitters, to LinkedIn, to all these platforms, and are able to put themselves out there, put what they have done, highlight and showcase things and achievements that they have made. And so it is easier because it is able to be put out there in a somewhat free manner. It doesn't have a high barrier of entry, but it is tough because there are many others that are in that same boat, that are doing the same thing, to have the same access to the same tools. So really differentiating yourself and finding those tools and experiences that you have that make you different and better than the other candidate that you may be going into a job interview for.
Sure. So share with me some secrets that people may not think of when branding themselves.
One big one is what I call the brag sheet. It is simply a Word document or just a piece of printer paper, and it lists all the accomplishments that you have as a person for your professional experience. So what projects did you work on? Did you lead them? Did you work with cross-functional teams? Were you able to work with outside vendors? And so that will help you when it comes time for the interview. You're able to fall back on here, not just like what I think of Missouri, one of the slogans is the show me state. Employers, they want you to show them the work that you've done and the work that you can do for them. So by having your brag sheet and the information and topics and achievements together in an easy to put together document or a portfolio, with maybe a couple printouts of some summaries and some charts that you're able to pull out in an interview, those things really may seem small, but to an employer, they're big. And many times that ends up being one of the key differentiators from candidate A from candidate B, because candidate B may not bring the portfolio with the work that they have done. They may have the education and experience, but candidate A may be able to show that experience that they have had.
So is a brag sheet different than a resume? Can you roll them into one document, or do you prefer that they be separate?
They start out separate. So the way I have the resume built and just the structure and the process starts with the brag sheet, because many people say, where do I start with a resume? What information do I put in there? So you want to start with, okay, what things have I accomplished? Especially for students that might say, I don't have 15 years of experience, but I do have experience working with other students in groups. I have experience presenting. I have experience selling myself for projects. And so really having that information in an easy to find place when you go to career services or you talk to somebody like me, to able to start out and say, okay, John Smith, what have you done? Where are we at today? And so we can start with those brag sheet accomplishments, and then we can feed that into the resume, feed in the education, the experience, and that really, they work hand in hand, the brag sheet and the resume.
Yeah. I bet you a number of people actually have accomplished a lot more than they think they have. But if they sit down and write it all down, they realize it can be very substantial.
They do, and that is one thing that I want to kind of share with the viewers and our listeners, is that accept who you are and where you are right now, and look at all those things that you've done. Just take a step back and look at, hey, what have I accomplished in the last year or the last 5 years? And you would really be surprised, as I have been, that at different points in my career where you go through the peaks and the valleys, you may be in a valley and might be tough sledding for a minute, and then you look back and say, wow, I accomplished all these things. I need to accept this is who I am, and I need to show that to the interviewers and to the employers that may look through a resume and see, okay, you have experience, but being able to say, okay, I've also been doing this as well. So you may see a gap here, but I don't just have a gap. It is a gap plus different tools and resources that you have put in your tool belt as you continue that process if you are searching for that job.
So share with me a success story at the individual level, like someone who's come to you. You share like who this person was and how you move this person through the process and then the outcome. Can you?
Absolutely. A couple semesters ago, one of my students came to me after class after we were talking about some of the career development and preparation topics, and said, would you mind looking at my resume? And here's a junior in college. And so I didn't know what to expect looking at a resume. I thought there might be maybe some retail experience, maybe an internship. But the experience that I saw in this student's resume looked sometimes better than some of the people that are a little bit more seasoned of really being a go-getter. Not only did they go through their schoolwork and achieving great grades, they were leading all their projects, and they were filtering that into their resume in that same terminology that I really teach to make sure that you're getting credit for that. So you may be a junior in college, or you may be a freshman, you have experience. So this individual, he came to me and we talked about his resume, and I was blown away with the experience he had. And he also started his own company just from scratch. He started a t-shirt company, and that was something just showed me the drive of a student, not just, hey, I'm going to go through my coursework. It's like, no, I'm going to continue and do little things that I can. He's not out to make millions of dollars. He's out to differentiate himself. So when he goes to an interview, he can fall back and say, oh, by the way, here's the different and better that I have versus other candidates. Check out my website. Check out my product. And this individual was able to have a job offer. Literally, he could have started as a junior in college, but day one, once he had graduated, he had employment of exactly what he wanted to do, which is sometimes tough to find in individuals. You kind of sometimes go through life and jobs kind of take you on a winding path, and you may have started your career saying, hey, I want to be a director of marketing, and you start out as maybe an accounting analyst, and then you move over to maybe finance because you're doing well there, and you kind of get through 15 years of experience, and you haven't really done what you've wanted to do. When you started the game, you wanted to do and go down a certain path, and so your winding road is taking you way to the left when you wanted to go to the right. And so by identifying what you want as a person, what makes you happy, you spend way more time with your work family than you do with your own family. And so it makes sense to start out and say, here are the things that I like, here are the things that I don't like. And I'm going to be a little bit, I'm going to be very selfish to maybe some opportunities that come along because they don't fit in with my mission. Not just what a company's mission is, but what's your mission as an individual? What do you want to do? I have prided myself on wanting to help others, and that is something that, whether it is through teaching, whether it is through the mental health avenue of being somebody with mental illness, that any time that I can help someone and provide information, that is what I want to do. So I am not going to accept positions and opportunities that don't fall into that little silo, because I've learned through the years that I need to do what makes me happy and my family happy, not what a company might be looking to hire at this point, and then maybe they look to cut back in a year.
Thank you. Our guest today is Justin Hayes, author of the book, The House of You, and we're talking about personal branding. And Justin just shared a success story with us. So it sounds like some of the best advice you could give is really just being a mirror or a sounding board for students, echoing back, or anyone else, but echoing back what they've done and making that particular experience meaningful to them so that it can be put in a brag sheet in a special way and cherished and treated as important when you go out to an employer. Get that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you're at an interview, it makes the interview go by a little bit easier when you take that approach. And why is that? There is a lot of stress in today's world, none more than a job interview. And I look for ways to reduce stress at any time that I can. And so by being myself and that individual being themselves, it helps that process of saying, I'm not trying to be somebody else. I'm being myself. So I may have a little bit of trouble and being nervous going into the interview, but when I'm speaking about my accomplishments, they're my accomplishments. And so I'm proud of those. It's not my fellow student or a family member or a friend. It's mine. And so when you own that, you feel more at ease.
I'd like to take the conversation into the social media realm relative to branding. Can you share with me some maybe do's and don'ts if you're looking for a job, what you maybe shouldn't do, do's and don'ts of social media?
Absolutely. I would think for me, the first thing I would do is possibly start a new account for your brand, for yourself. So kind of as a company has their own social media account, start one like for myself, Justin Allen Hayes Inc. or Justin Allen Hayes LLC, and have that be where the brand and all that information and all those assignments, those achievements, accomplishments can be put in that realm so an employer and others can view that. Now, on the flip side, why that is helpful is you want to not mix your personal with your professional. And so you don't want to have personal information, hey, we're going out tonight, or we went out last night and here are some things we did, and maybe post some pictures that could turn off an employer. You want to have, as a professional, a more button-up approach. And so if you separate the two and have kind of those two different profiles, that way you're able to, on your professional side, you're able to have all the professional information. On your personal side, you're able to restrict what others can see. So you can make things private or maybe choose a different platform. Now, things not to post and not to do are those photos of being out on the town where you have the glasses of alcohol showing and every picture and there's quotes and there's captions that's talking about that. I was there before. I understand that that's how life goes at certain points. Sure. But as a professional and as an employer, they mean business. They want somebody to come in to do the job, but they also want that brand. They want that person not only inside those four walls of that organization, but as we find in the pandemic, outside, when you're in that virtual environment. How are you going to act? And do we have to worry about an event that happens that we have to address in the news and we have to put out a press release? Or do we have somebody that comes in, they do their job, and they may have some things on the side that they're working for. They may have a business that they want to go towards. But then that individual, that second individual, has a much better look versus the first. And just like interview candidates, having a candidate that has that button-up approach is going to grow leaps and bounds in those interview debriefs where the interviewers, they sit together in a room and they talk about, hey, we had 3 candidates come in for position A. What were the strengths of candidate A, B, and C, and what are their areas to work on? So the more areas you can have and you can control, that you do the best you can, because you can't control 100%. Sure. And those things that, hey, the interviewer didn't like the color tie that you wore, or they spilled coffee on themselves on the way to the interview, or had a disagreement with a spouse prior to coming to work. You can't control those things. Just focus on those things that you can control. And so with social media, you're able to control what gets put out there. You can't control what gets said about you, but you can control the content you put out there.
I want to take us away from staying with branding, but taking us away from the realm of job searching and just branding yourself not related to jobs, branding yourself as a father, branding yourself as, an uncle, or just branding yourself to your friends. Can you comment about how important branding is outside of the realm of either job searching or a job?
Absolutely. On the personal side, I kind of think of each of us who have a spouse, we had to have a connection with that spouse at some point. And so when we met that spouse, we were really branding ourselves wherever we met them, the things that we were doing, the places you would go possibly for dates, if you go to a sporting event or to a concert. Everything is your brand, whether it is personal or whether it is a blog that you're writing for the American Marketing Association. And really everything, and I can't stress enough, everything that an individual does is a brand. And I think part of it is very cool because you're actually the chief marketing officer of you. You're the chief executive officer of you. You get to control a lot of the content that gets pushed out. You can't control some of that feedback, but you can day to day, whether it's with a spouse, whether it's with a son or daughter, with a nephew or niece, or with a job, everything you do is a brand. Even to right now, wearing a blazer and dress pants and dress shoes, it's a brand.
Is there a difference in how you brand yourself during a pandemic versus how you brand yourself during, quote, normal times, whatever that means? What would you do? What do you do different? Should you do different during, a pandemic?
So I would focus on first yourself. We are spending more and more time at home, working virtually. Focus on yourself. If you don't have that energy and that health, then you're not going to be able to go to an employer and do your best work, or go to that interview virtually and talk about your best accomplishments. So by you concentrating on yourself and putting yourself in the best light that you can, that is really going to help you, especially with a pandemic. And one key area with having the expanded, what I call expanded screen time, having the extra screen of working at home, you may work 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. normally, and with the pandemic that is occurring, you may find yourself in between shows in the evening, checking a few emails, working on a project just to get yourself set up for the next day. And so you're spending more and more times on the screen. Set some boundaries where you can just unplug, whether that is at lunchtime, which I definitely want to make sure that you're eating 3 meals a day. It's very easy to really go through your lunch and work right through that and it wind up being 2 p.m. and going, oh crap, I haven't eaten lunch yet. And really focusing on yourself is really putting you in the best position in your brand to be rested, to be sharp, to be your best self, which is what you want to be to those in your personal and your professional life.
Yeah, sure. Interesting. Touch on, in your book, 5 workforce preparation tips. The very first of those tips is a blueprint.
Yes.
And you set the blueprint as kind of the foundation, although foundation is another, but as the foundation for what comes next. So tell the viewers, what are the essence of a blueprint? What are the elements, and how do you kind of start establishing your own blueprint for yourself?
Absolutely. So you look inside yourself. So it might sound philosophical, but you have to start with the end in mind. You want to go after job positions, go after employers that fit your mindset and where you want to be as an individual. And so that means set a plan out there. So it may be obtain a job. Okay, that's great. But there are many steps in between. Do you have a resume? Do you have mentors that can help maybe do some interviewing practice with you? Do you have a LinkedIn profile established? What things do you have versus what things don't you have? And that's really going to set you up from that planning process of that step one. just as many of us, when we have New Year's resolutions, comes January 1st, and we have all these things that we want to do, and we might do it for a little bit of time, and then it kind of might fade away at a period of time. And with that, what ends up happening is a person falls off the wagon, and they lose that focus. So it's not only establishing that plan, but it's honing that focus and executing against that.
Thank you very much. I often think of this pandemic as the equivalent of Disney World's Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. For even as it seems we have more time at home, it also feels like we have less time for ourselves. Life is a journey, and I hope you make the most of yours. The takeaway from our guest today is that we should not lose sight of the importance of investing in ourselves and to nurture our relationships, professional as well as personal. Thank you to our guest today, Mr. Hayes, the House of You, houseofyou.com, and thank you for joining us on Forum 360.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.